Am Metaknight Chapter 1. A year and a half has passed. Popstar is dead, and Jonathan is still alive. But that is another story for another time. Only 4 have survived. "Metaknight, come over here! I found something!" screamed Sword. Metaknight was in a deep sleep. He had trained himself to sleep with his eyes open. He was in the midst of a dream. He dreamed of the future of Popstar. All he could see were flames engulfing everything. He couldn't make out much, but he saw himself and his friends, all dead, in one puddle of blood that drenched the bits of gravel surrounding them and soaked into the smallest of cracks. Plants drank it and turned black. It died in a long, painful, slowly burning, insanely strenuous, grim death. He then looked in front of him, which revealed a school bus with one of the most insane looks upon its face. The bus had a face! A happy face! Happy it had caused this much destruction and mayhem. He couldn't look upon it any longer, so he looked down to see the sales guy in an even bigger puddle of blood. This time, his entire face was charred. He was so disfigured, Medi could barely recognize him. One of his eyeballs was dangling out of its socket. The other was laying under the wheel of the bus, smashed into a thick consistency, similar to a hard-boiled egg smashed upon the ground, but with blood. Ew! He then proceeded to cough up a gallon of blood, and then laughed a bloody laugh. Finally, he coughed a bloody drumstick very similar to the one Escargoon had half-digested a year and a half ago. The last vision he saw was a reflection in the sales guy's sunglasses of a figure standing behind him that was engulfed in flames. He then woke up. He said. "Sir, why are you exclaiming?" asked Sword.
"Do you have another dream?"
asked Blade. "Yes, but this time it ended very badly." It was dead silent. "But sir, what's this mean for us?" asked Sword. Metaknight just stared and didn't respond. "Metaknight, what's wrong?" yelled Sword. "Don't scream so close to me. We have work to do," said Medi. "Let's do this like Brutus," said Metaknight. "But sir, we haven't sang our warm-up song yet." "You're right! How did I forget?" exclaimed Metaknight. Cue Yata. After the vigorous warm-up, Metaknight pulled out a giant battered platter. That belonged to his dead mother. "This belonged to my dead mother, Galactonite," he said to Sword and Blade, as a single tear worked its way down his weathered, war-torn face. He looked at his reflection in the plate. He watched it morph into the visage of his mother. His heart felt like it had been stabbed with a rusty knife, torn out of his chest, stomped on, then spread all over the floor in a gory mess. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Blade.
"I'm sorry, sir,"
Blade said in a comforting tone. Sword looked upon the two of them with envy, jealous that they were sharing such an intimate moment, and he could not be a part of it. Instead of responding in kindness as Blade had, he lashed out in spite. "You're not the only one with dead parents, Metaknight!" There was silence. Blade shot a venom-filled glare at Sword that sent chills down his spine, and he immediately regretted his moment of anger. He quickly mumbled an apology. "Never mind, Sword. I know, we've all suffered. But we can't focus on that right now." Metaknight stepped away from his cohort's platter in hand. "We have work to do." The world was in ruin. The virus had taken its toll on the entire planet. The Knights had assumed that there would be more survivors than just the 3 of them, and there were, but not for long. The infected individuals had been transformed into something beastly and primal, grotesque mutations of the beings they once were, endowed with supernatural strength. These zombies, for lack of a better term, had risen up, slaying the few others who had been immune. Only Metaknight, Sword, and Blade were left now. Technically, Dedede was still around, or at least they assumed so, and Kirby was somewhere far away. He had been for a long time. Metaknight secretly hoped he would never return. After all, he wouldn't want his only son to see what had become of the planet he had once saved. The fact of the matter was that they were hopelessly alone, but they planned to change that. The 3 of them had been coming up with a cure to change the infected victims back to their original forms. They had managed to catch a few of the Cappies, like the Mayor and Chief Bookham, to test their antidote on them. Unfortunately, it ended in failure. All the Cappies died of the effects of the antidotes. Metaknight, Sword, and Blade had to catch more zombies so they could test their latest antidote. They reached the outskirts of Cappy Town, or what was left of it. After everyone was infected, the zombies went on a rampage and destroyed everything in sight. Kawasaki's restaurant was no more. The zombies had demolished it with their bare hands. Some of the homes still stood, but there were huge holes in the side of them, and most of the windows were shattered. "Keep a sharp eye out for any zombies," Metaknight told his comrades. Sword and Blade nodded. The 3 of them carefully made their way into the ruined Cappy Town. "What exactly is the plate for, anyway?" Sword asked Metaknight. "We need the zombies, and the only way to get them to come out is..." Metaknight stopped. He wasn't sure if he wanted to finish his sentence. He didn't want to risk Sword and Blade's lives, but they had to test their latest cure to save Popstar.
What is it?
Asked Blade. "They'll only come out for..."
What is it?
"Live bait," Metaknight finally said. Sword and Blade gasped. "But where are we gonna find live bait?" asked Sword. "One of us will have to be the bait," Metaknight answered. They were all silent. "But who..." Sword started to ask.
I don't know it.
Metaknight closed his eyes, and he slowly turned to face Blade. Sword looked at Blade in surprise. Blade was the most afraid of the zombies, and he couldn't understand why Blade would offer to be the bait. "Are you sure about this, Blade?" Metaknight asked.
I am sure.
"I thought you were scared of the zombies." Sword was very concerned for his best friend.
I am here.
"Very well, let's go," Metaknight said. The trio found a house that looked promising. Metaknight set the plate down in front of the door and told Blade to sit on it. Blade did so, and Metaknight put an apple onto Blade's mask. "Now, you just need to sit here and wait for the zombie to come out. When it does, Sword and I will catch it," Metaknight explained. Said Blade. Metaknight and Sword quickly hid behind the mayor's broken-down car so they wouldn't be seen by the zombies. They all waited nervously. It felt like they had been sitting there for hours. Suddenly, horrible noises started coming from inside the house. The zombies must have found the Blade's scent, Metaknight thought. Blade waited nervously on the plate. Blade was trying hard not to scream or to run for it. Blade knew they needed one of the zombies. The fate of Popstar depended on it. Just then, one of the zombies started slowly emerging from the house. Its face was so distorted that it was hard to tell who this zombie used to be. It had piercing, glowing eyes and sharp fangs. There was one feature on the creature that Blade recognized. This zombie had yellow hair with green streaks in it. Blade shouted in surprise. Tuff let out an ear screech. Blade wailed in horror as the demented Tuff started closing in. "Oh no! after the zombies! Sword shouted. We'll have to catch it now before Blade gets hurt, Meta Knight yelled. Blade was crying with terror. Meta Knight and Sword quickly came out from behind the car and tossed a net over Zombie Tough. Meta Knight pulled out his sword and hit Tough over the head and knocked him out. Don't worry, Blade, you're safe now, Sword said reassuringly. Blade cried and pointed at the door of the house. An even more distorted-looking zombie than Tough stuck its ugly head out. The zombie had beady eyes, pale, scarred skin, long arms with sharp claws at the ends of its fingers, blood-stained clothes, and a long, matted ponytail with tufts of hair missing. The disgusted and horrified Meta Knight realized that it was Tiff. Tiff grinned wickedly, revealing multiple rows of razor-sharp, blood-dripping fangs. Like a shark! Tiff ran at the three knights. Meta Knight leaped out of the way with the net while Sword barely dodged Tiff's claws. Blade almost cracked with fright. Tiff turned her attention to Blade, then she lunged. Blade! Screamed Meta Knight and Sword. The end of Chapter 2. 1.